Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of HOPStart. Today's episode is really interesting and socially conscious because we interview someone from Breakthrough. Now, Breakthrough is an organization that works very heavily with women's issues in India, and we thought we'd go ahead and have a quick chat with someone from their organization.
My name is Shohini Bhattacharya and I'm the CEO and President of an organization called Breakthrough.
Hi Shohini, welcome to HOPStart. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to let us interview you. So I'm just going to start with asking you the very basic question. What exactly is Breakthrough India?
Breakthrough is an organization that was founded 20 years ago to address violence against women and girls and to change the dominant culture that breeds, this kind of violence. If you must know that violence against women and girls is one of the most pervasive human rights abuse in the whole world, and the most tolerated. So how do we create a new norm in which everyone thrives and reaches their full potential?
Fair enough. So your organization is one that is goes and educates individuals about this, or is it a bit more complicated than that?
It's much more complicated than that, actually. What we want to do is actually change the dominant norms around gender-based violence. Gender-based violence encompasses all gender, but we focus on mostly women and girls. So we want to address the mindsets, the behaviors, the attitudes, the whole 360 degree that you have, so that the community and the society learns to value girls more.
Fair enough. And how old is this organization?
The organization is about 20 years old. We started out in 1999 with a song video called Man Ke Manjire, which was very popular, went to the top of the charts, stayed there for 6 months, reached a huge number of people and brought out conversation on domestic violence out into the open. That's
interesting. So when you founded it, were you part of it 20 years ago when it started?
No, it was founded by someone called Malika Dutt, who was a very well-known human rights activist. At that point of time, she was a Ford Foundation program officer. But this was her whole thing about how to create a language in which people understand human rights much better part of themselves.
Fair enough. So then how did you get involved with Breakthrough?
So, I have been involved in the development sector for the last 30 years. And I met Malika about 25 years ago as part of some other organization that I was working in. And so I was aware of Breakthrough. And in 2010, when I was leaving the organization that I was working with before, I think they approached me and they said if I'd like to kind of head their fundraising, vertical. There wasn't any vertical at that point of time. So Breakthrough was small, tiny compared to today. It was 21 people at that point of time. And so I joined as a part-time consultant in 2010. And then the rest of it followed.
So you're saying it was smaller back then. So how big is your organization right now?
We have about 140 people across 5 states of India. We work in Delhi, Haryana, UP, Jharkhand and Bihar. And we have offices in Gaya and Lucknow and a small office in Rohtak in Haryana.
That's interesting. So there's definitely been a growth. And
there has been a growth.
So could you talk to me a little bit about that growth? Because the social sector and organizations such as yours it's interesting to shine a spotlight to see how they grow and how they develop a certain kind of consciousness amongst the people. So how exactly did that growth happen, and what do you think were the main factors for that growth?
So for the first, I think 10 years of the organization's life, 11 years of the organization's lives, we did very path-breaking campaigns. Campaigns that would address gender norms, campaigns that would affect people's behavior and attitudes. In one of our signature campaign was Bell Bajao, and why I'm mentioning is because it has a repercussion later on. So Bell Bajao was a campaign that asked men and boys to stand up and take action on violence against women. It went out to a huge number of people, 130 million people, adopted by the government of India, adopted in another 9 languages all over the world. This campaign, when we were doing the end line of this campaign, we found out that the women who were least equipped to fight domestic violence were actually women who've been married as young girls. So, they were 12, 13, 14. that made us think and lower the age group. And we thought a very concerted approach is needed with adolescents in the community, the age group of 11 to 18, when socialization is happening and norms are being built, to approach them if we were to see a generational change in this whole aspect of violence against women. So in 2012, we started working with adolescents. And then when you start working deeply into the community, the work actually grows. And because India is such a large country, until and unless you can show change among a critical mass of people, it is like a drop, Anyway, what we do is like a drop, because we cannot do so much, such a large scale. But that's how the organization grew, and we now work with about 400,000 adolescents across these 5 states, and about 12,000 adult men and women. We have a media voice and a social media voice that goes out to millions of people, and our mass media actually is watched by millions of people. So.
That's interesting, because when you talk about working with individuals, can I know what exactly does that entail? So just to know that how your organization actually reaches the grassroots and stuff like that.
So if you talk about the adolescents, we have a curriculum called Taro Ki Toli, which we work with in government schools. We work during the school hour, 45-minute session. This curriculum actually builds agency of young girls and boys. It teaches you negotiation skills, how to have difficult conversations on taboo subjects, and to recognize gender-based discrimination and violence in their life and to take action on it. So you do a 2.5 year of curriculum. We also work in the community because, until and unless the ecosystem is addressed, young girls and boys do not really have the permission to do a lot more changes than they are capable of. So we also use community mobilization and then mass media to talk to the rest of the community. Say that girls and boys have the rights to do this. Their agency have to be built. They have to be supported in order to delay age of marriage, in order to stay in school for more years, and in order to do what their choices and options are.
So how does that work though? Like in terms of, isn't it really hard to get that message across? So what have been some of the points where you've just been like, oh my God, my message isn't being get through, how do I do this? Like how do you get past situations like that?
I think one of the hardest was when we tried to address the sex ratio in Haryana. A lot of organizations and a lot of government money has gone into working on this issue. But it still happens, and it was really difficult to break through to the community to make them understand in their language why they should value girls, because girls are seen as somebody who is not going to earn money, who is not going to, uplift the family name or carry on the family tradition. So they are like paradhan, right? That's how we refer to girls.
Sadly,
so it was really a very difficult area to work in, in a state where girls are named Antim and Bhateri, which means the end, or enough, which means that will end the line of girls in that family. To go through your life with a name that reminds you how unwanted you are every time, So it was a really difficult part and a challenging place to work in. But I must say we have been successful with the young people that we have worked with. What we see is that when you talk about gender and rights to young girls and boys, the thing that happens is active citizenship. They stand up and they take action. And first they start thinking about themselves, but then they take action for their community, for their societies. We've seen this time and again. So we have a belief that yes, someday, it will be possible to change and bring an end to violence against women.
No, but I think that begs the question of, I think that, like you're right, I think it's easier to awaken this kind of consciousness in younger individuals because they seem to be more listening to thought. But what about amongst old individuals, amongst the parents? How does that conversation,
That is a difficult conversation. And we have been having that conversation. What we've seen is it takes a long time, but people do change. We have seen teachers taking action. We've seen sarpanches taking action. Who are really in Haryana, the sarpanches are the epitome of patriarchy, right? We've seen sarpanches go with girls, accompany them for matches outside the village, where earlier on they had read the riot act that no girls is going to go out of village to play a game, So people have come around. It's important how you show them what is possible. And if you show them what is possible, if a girl has the agency, then I think, I think people really think about it twice.
Okay, that's great. Everyone, stay tuned, because after the break we have a lot more to talk about, about breakthrough. Welcome back to HOPStart. We're having a chat with Shoini from Breakthrough. So, we were talking a little bit about, how you actually change mindsets within, within rural areas that you work through with Breakthrough. But I wanted to ask you about how the landscape has changed over these last 20 years, because is your job easier now 20 years later, or is it still as difficult to try and make change?
I think violence against women has over the years increased.
Okay.
If you ask me, one reason is that more women occupy the public space, and there are some feminist theories which say that when women occupy more public space, they're seen as threats, and so the one way that you can retaliate is taking violence, it out, and there's violence. So it is happening more. More are being reported also. There is a lot of awareness in media and among common people, which was not there 20 years ago. So more is being reported. Media is making a point of taking note of incidences of violence against women. What we see really is, the decrease in the age at which violence is happening. You see, 1-year-old, 3-year-old. I mean, sometimes you wonder whether people are crazy, but it is happening, and a lot is being reported. So, it is always a challenging environment to work on.
Fair enough. Yeah. I think the reason I was asking that question over the years, has it changed? Because at least I feel like in the last 20 years, and maybe with the advent of social media and people just having access to phones and the internet and technology, and especially with the growth of, just saying that you're a feminist in India is something that is a conversation talked about proudly now. And so I was just wondering whether that has changed, or you've got more followers for your organization, understanding the depth of the work that you're doing now more than maybe 20 years ago. Is that not the case?
20 years ago there was no social media, so the outreach wasn't like this. Of course. Yeah. So yes, there are more aware people out there who are talking about this, who are trying to kind of reimagine feminism in their own way, which is good and bad in both ways. It's like really good that people are accepting feminism as something, and they are redefining it, which is always great for us. But yes, there are more awareness out there, but there's also more awareness, more focus recently on women and violence with the Me Too movement that we've seen. There's been a more focus on this whole issue of violence, but changing the norm is always difficult, as we have discovered, because you are actually essentially addressing people at the core. Who you are. You are questioning that bit. That is
very
difficult.
Uncomfortable.
That makes people. So whenever I talk about the issue that Breakthrough works in some public gathering, I see heads going down or people not making eye contact. That happens.
Yeah, that's really sad. But I can understand why that might happen. But I think I want to get to what exactly are the kind of people that you work with, and the kind of people you look to recruit into your organization. Because I think social media has allowed individuals to be politically conscious on a mass level, and say, hey, this is my opinion on something, I do not stand for this. So what kind of people do you look for when they're trying to hire into your organization?
One of the main things that we look for in Breakthrough is passion. You have to be passionate. You have to be really care deeply for this issue. So that's an underlying thing. That's a non-negotiable. There are two kinds of people that we look for. One is people who are from the communities where we work, because we believe they understand the communities the best. So people who have worked at the community level, people who have worked with people in Haryana and UP, wherever we are working. The other kind of people that we look for are sector specialists, and people who have media expertise, people who have marketing expertise, people who have fundraising expertise, people who have HR expertise, because we need those people to run the entire organization.
So like you rightfully said, you do have to have a certain kind of compliance as an NGO that, because you are handling public money. But what about the government? Do you have any support from, local governments or even state governments, because you work in five states? Do they help in any way?
So we get a lot of support from district level government, from the local panchayats, sometimes from state government as well, sometimes from national government as well. It has to be, it depends on what are you offering. So basically, when we work into government schools, we do not do that without permission from the government. You cannot just walk into a government school. So you have to have permission of NCERT or SCERT, whatever is applicable at that place. We work very closely with panchayat members and others because they are the gatekeepers of this society, right? So if we cannot bring them into the conversation, how are we going to even start breaking those norms? So we have got, we've got fabulous support from some of the local panchayats and some of the local state governments, district governments. With the government with the Ministry of Women and Child Development also, I believe one of our campaigns is right now, one of the films is being shown in television, I think film show, cinema halls across India. And the ministry asked us for some of the communication. We offered it to them. They're showing that. So that's a big support that we can ask from the government, because we alone cannot really disseminate our product so widely.
Yeah, you're right. Because I think one of the criticisms of the social sector almost sometimes is that, it does great work, but it takes away because the government now has this fallback person, because then they know that they can work with this thing. That's usually the criticism that I've heard. But what do you think about the growth of these kind of organizations? Because of course the government can't take care of everything. So what would you say to those naysayers about, hey, the government's not doing their job, therefore as private individuals we have to get into it?
The government, has a vast country to run. And so I see NGOs in many places coming in to support some of that work. And even, in some places, NGOs have come up with interesting solutions that maybe the government can, the government can actually copy or follow. That those kind of things are also happening all over the place. So I see it's as a healthy partnership more than any kind of other things. It's a healthy partnership between the government and NGOs, and it is essential to think of reaching large numbers. It is essential to have some kind of a partnership with a government entity, because that will only help you really get a scale out there.
Fair enough. And just to conclude, where would you like to see Breakthrough, let's say, another 10 years?
I mean, I don't know, 10 years, in 20 years, we would like to actually shut up shop, because we would expect the violence against women to have been solved. Young girls living their life to their fullest potential.
That's an interesting answer. Thank you so much for your time. This interview has been very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.